Hello everyone, I want to start off by saying a big thank you to B-Sides for hosting such a welcoming event. It's a real privilege here to be speaking today to such a diverse audience. With that said, just a bit about me. I'm a third year cybersecurity student at Manchester Metropolitan University. Network security and AI is quite some fascinating topics that I've took a keen interest in. In my spare time, I'm working towards becoming the top 1% in Hacker 101. And as well as some Cisco certified certificates. With that out the way, we can now move forward into the introduction. So, cabled IoT devices are everywhere around us, whether you recognize it or not. Just to name a few, you've got Ring doorbells, you've got CCTVs or camera systems that are being integrated with mobile apps, as well as the recent advancements of VoIP technology. Unfortunately, due to the lack of standards and regulations, most of these are left vulnerable. So we'll start off by looking at some bad cabling practices on both domestic properties and commercial properties, some vulnerabilities associated with them, and some of the implications, and we'll conclude on the mitigations. So now that that's been covered, just to provide a bit of context behind why I've chosen to speak about today's discussion, I want to dedicate the next minute or two explaining the story that led up to the idea. So, as a student, I'm in some student accommodation. We didn't originally have a Wi-Fi connection established when we originally moved in. So the landlord set up some network technicians to come and establish a fibre optic connection. At first, the technicians tried to get the fibre optic box at the front of the house, at the front of the property, as this was just the most convenient connection point. Unfortunately, after a couple of hours of trying to establish that connection, it wasn't possible. This resulted in the fibre optic box being placed in the garden as opposed to the front of the house. Now, as you do, I was weighing the pros and cons of this, and I found there was a lot more pros to having the box at the back of the house as opposed to the front, where there's a lot of public footpath and accessibility. And I found this kind of spiraled into a little tangent of our businesses taking care of their own cables. And to my surprise, there is a lot of vulnerabilities even on the commercial side of things. So to give you a better perspective on the problem at hand, here are some images that I've taken myself. This is no more than a 30-second walk from my university. As you can see, the cables here are visible and easily accessible. It's probably worth noting that there was some sort of attempt made here to kind of cover the bottom half of the cabling, but in my opinion, it's just not adequate. There's still visible cables, it's still easily accessible. Some services on here that we can identify are some network connections, a fire alarm system, and on the other side of the property, there was a camera system too. Obviously, it wasn't captured in this photo. Now, on domestic properties, this is a fibre optic connection. As you can see, it's just placed beside the front door on the front of the property. So now, to get a better understanding of the implications of poor cabling, we must first discuss the vulnerabilities associated with poor cabling. First and foremost, you've got a denial of service attack. If the cables are visible and if they're accessible, then you're prone to attacker potentially tampering, damaging, or cutting the cables to deny your service. Next vulnerability will be an eavesdropping vulnerability. An attacker could use something such as a data socket to intercept the traffic passing through the wire. And this would be the eavesdropping. A step further from the eavesdropping is a man-in-the-middle attack. If you're able to intercept that data, then you're most likely able to alter the data too. Following our discussion, we can now move on to the implications of poor cabling. What does poor cabling actually mean for a business owner or a homeowner? Starting with businesses, the combination of downtime, data breaches, financial loss, and chaos could force its closure. Downtime alone is costing businesses an average of 3.6 million every year. And for domestic properties, having your cables cut could be a big pain in the backside, quite frankly. It could be weeks of waiting for a new connection to be established. So that's for domestic properties. Now, in my opinion, A physical layer attack is most effective when it's combined with other attack vectors. For example, universities and hospitals all have different departments within their building. So you could potentially attack a certain department's physical layer and combine it and launch another attack in another department to kind of become a more effective attack. And on the right side, you've got a little table just briefly showing you how each vulnerability affects the CIA triad. As you can see, more or less every area is covered here just by 3 vulnerabilities alone. Finally, moving on to our final segments, we'll take a look at some of the mitigations that can help solve poor cabling practices, starting with placing cables in concealed areas. So in my case, with my story that led up to the idea, the fiber optic connection was placed in the garden. This simply just meant that it was outside of public view. No one had easy access to it. Therefore, it kind of lowered that attack surface. This could be done in commercial areas too. I appreciate that not every building has concealed areas or private areas. And that's where our second mitigation comes into play, and that will be cable capping. Now I've attached an image to kind of give you a little visualization of what this may look like. It essentially is just shielding the cabling with some sort of cover. In this case, this was plastic, but it can be in metal, it can be in rubber, all very adequate. And as your last little line of defense, you've got encrypting sensitive data in transit and at rest. This should be done regardless, to be honest with you. But if you've got it done, then it does act as that last line of defense. If an attacker is able to intercept your data, at least it's not readable. There's still a lot of data breaches where the data being stored is in plain text. No good. With that said, thank you all so much for listening. I'll open the floor to questions. I'm going to leave this screenshot on the screen right now. If you do wish to get in contact with me, there's my website. Thank you so much again for listening, and any questions are welcome.
Cheers for that. Just wondering, with, say, commercial or residential properties, by having cables in a concealed area, how much would that potentially help a malicious actor?
Well, it's out of sight. If it's out of sight, it's lowering that attack surface. You can't guarantee that it won't happen, but at least you're doing something to prevent it. That's the easiest option for you. It doesn't really take much cost. You can always position it in the garden, for example. And it will lower that attack surface for you.
Cool. Yes.
No worries.
I was just wondering, obviously one of the vulnerabilities you talked about is eavesdropping.
Yeah.
How easy is it actually to eavesdrop on a cable? Is that easy to do? Is that quite a sophisticated technique?
Well, I've got a reference on the next slide which gives you a very good walkthrough on how to do it. However, from my knowledge, it's a matter of getting the data socket, splicing the wires, getting those wires into the data socket, and then connecting it to the laptop to some sort of software that can analyze that traffic. The difficulty of it, I would say, it's not too difficult. It's just, in theory, it's possible. In practice, it may not be possible, because if you're attacking wires on the outside of a building, you're going to have to be stood outside the building. It's a bit awkward. So, the difficulty is not too bad, but in practice, you may have some trouble with it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, thank you.
What do you think, recommendation-wise, people would take up? Because I can't see BT or anyone like Virgin listening to what you're saying because of the cost. Because of cost?
Well, your first mitigation has near enough no cost. If you're a homeowner yourself, you can probably talk to those network technicians and say, listen, mate, can I just have this placed at the back of the house instead of the front where it's accessible? And I'm pretty sure they'll be understanding with you. So in that regard, there isn't too much cost for homeowners. It may become a problem when you're dealing with commercial properties. That's where your cost might become a bit higher, and you may have to weigh those pros and cons and see if that's the right choice for your business.
I have a question myself, in fact, before I pass it on. Is there tamper-evident solutions instead of trying to tamper-proof these cables?
Is there a tamper-evident? Sorry, can you just clarify?
So tamper-evident as in, is there a way, or is there solutions for, like, the cladding, for example, so that you would be able to clearly see and perhaps identify attackers who were interacting?
Okay. I guess there should be. It would be a good idea if there was. If not, you can install cameras on the property. That could maybe help. But yeah, I'm sure there would be ways of identifying if it has been tampered. If you have cable capping, then you can assure that if it's been changed or tampered with, you'll be able to identify the movement of the cable capping. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Outside of just attacking the endpoints of people's houses, would it not be a more, how do I say it, viable way to attack like the switch boxes at the end of each street? Because I know with BT and other infrastructure providers, they'll have like copper cables coming out from those?
Possibly. I haven't thought about that myself.
Yeah.
But you're more than likely correct.
Yeah.
That's something that's kind of out of your control. So this one looks at what you can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah, question over there.
No, one more. Yeah, this will be the last one then.
Have you seen any examples of attacks like this happening in the wild, and do you know the kind of cost of an attack?
I haven't. Actually, when researching this presentation, there was near enough nothing, no statistics on it. I think it's something that goes unnoticed and untalked about, whether it's because of it's not happening or whether someone's just not paying attention to it. I don't know. But the vulnerabilities associated with them are quite critical enough to at least bring it up. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, and however much a high-vis jacket costs, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you again to our speaker.
Thank you.